Hey everyone, welcome to Big Blend Radio. You just heard Dynamic Equilibrium, and that's from the new album by guitarist Dallas Perkins. It's called Experimental Truth. And when you listen to the album, you'll get it. It is just, it's badass. You need to get it. It's out now. Go to dallasperkins.com, and we're super happy to have him here on the show. Dallas, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Lisa?
Oh, doing good, doing good. So you're
Thanks so
out
much
in
for having me.
LA.
What's
Oh,
I'm
you
sorry?
bet. I said you're out in LA, right?
I am indeed, yes.
Ah, sweet. I hear that you do a lot, you have your own band out there, you do a lot of session work still, and
Yeah,
is
yeah.
gigging back on now?
Keeping it, it will be soon. I've been very busy with promo for the album,
Mm,
and a lot of things in the works with that, video projects coming up. But yeah,
awesome.
should be
I
back
love
out
the
very
album.
shortly. Yeah,
I love the album because there's so much like that you've packed into there, but it's like, and I always talk about this, how an album gets to flow.
hmm
And when someone like you has, like, you've got, I know they're calling you prog rock guitarist. I'm just like, you're just like this amazing guitarist. I don't, you can do a little bit of everything because there's jazz
Thank
in
you.
some songs, and then you go into like the classical side, and there's the prog
Sure.
rock side, but you seem to have like influences that, you're you soak it in from everywhere, and this album to me has that in there, and you
hmm
manage to make it flow, and I'm always amazed by musicians that can make an album flow when they bring so much in. After all, we are the big blend. We understand how that
Sure.
can be a problem.
Right, right. I could see you would be, I guess, somewhat of an authority on that.
Yeah, yeah, just well, yeah, because
Right?
it's like you have to tell people like you are interested in this, you just don't know it yet. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about getting this album. What was the whole startup for you?
Sure. So,
Especially being
yes,
instrumental, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, so I wanted the album to be, diverse, especially, anytime I go about writing instrumental music, I really wanted to encompass a lot of, styles and be pretty rich in that, in that regard. Um, but, specifically with, I guess, the task of writing, instrumental music is, well, first off, I want the song to kind of stand on its own. So, in other words,
Mm,
if you were to take out a lot of the solos, it would still be basically a strong composition.
mm,
And, so there's that. And, typically when I go about the writing process, it's usually, you want to kind of grasp that inspiration, right? You want it to
mhm,
continue to flow. So once I feel like I have something solid, then I begin to get more experimental and see what kind of direction to take it in. And more often than not, I'm usually thinking, very visually when I'm writing as well. Like what sort of theme am I going to build this piece of music around? So
mm.
so that's kind of in a nutshell the process for me.
I love that we started with Dynamic Equilibrium because it just shows us like that's to me one of the epic songs on the album. It just
Glad you
you
like it.
took us on like a major journey with that song. And then there's pieces like Azul that just kind of like, oh, okay, I'm gonna have a breather now. So that's why I was saying like how you put the album together was just brilliant. Like you give us this, all right, you don't know you're going here, but here we are. We're gonna kick ass, and then you're gonna like, all right, you can breathe,
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
know something's coming.
Right, right.
And to me, it's so funny because like Azul, I was like, oh, it's over. Like what? Now what's happening? Oh, okay. Now we're going to play Mexican puppets. I mean, tell us about that song too, right?
So yeah. Oh, okay. Mexican Puppets is interesting. So
I
that's
love
one
this.
where uh, when I set out to write that track in particular was is really the beginning of it was just based on the title,
Mm,
and it's kind of has a funny backstory to it. Mexican Puppets is a little story about these puppets that my grandmother brought back as a gift on a vacation to Mexico when I was about like 5 years old,
right, right.
and these puppets were, I wish I had them handy. I'd have
I
to dig
wish
them
you
out of the
did
closet,
too.
but if I did, I mean, even now to look at them, they're pretty menacing looking puppets, right? So they scared the hell out of myself and my cousins, and I always thought it was kind of there's something funny about it
It's
looking
kind of
back
like
on it.
fairy tales are mean. Like fairy
So
tales,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
fairy
So
tales and the puppets are mean.
right. In fact, the last interview I did, it was kind of interesting because the movie from the 70s, Trilogy of Terror, came up, and that's about a little doll that just turns into this psycho little creature and goes on the warpath, you know. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, Mexican puppets. Uh, it's I'm very fond of it. I actually have my grandmother doing an intro. It's I wrote the tune about 10 years ago.
Oh, is that your grandma did
And so
that
that's
was, I think,
actually
the
my
new movie? Yeah.
grandmother. You know, sadly she passed away the
Oh,
next year after that, but I got her to record that intro.
oh
So
my God.
yeah, so that's going to be one of the video projects coming up. And
Excellent.
more than likely that will probably uh, be out early next year because there's going to be a lot of work going into that. There's a lot of great ideas I had for that.
I think that's so cool because yeah, you could go to town with it because the whole puppetry, the dolls, which actually we're just talking about this with the conversation before you, it's just this whole, I mean, it's October, we get to talk about weird stuff, right?
Right,
But
right, right,
like we went to a doll museum
right.
and they had 3,000 dolls with all these just faces looking at you. And you know, when you go in places, some people have their childhood dolls and
Hmm.
puppets, and you're just like, no, don't look at me. Like I'll turn their face around, like, no, you're gonna
That's
freak me
interesting.
out,
A
you
puppet
know?
museum, huh?
Oh, it's a doll museum. This
Oh,
was in
doll
Louisiana
museum.
next to a
That's cool.
Gothic jail that was haunted. It is
Oh,
haunted.
okay.
When I went in there, they hanged two guys in there for killing a cab driver and putting him in a swamp. And then they carried their bodies out into town, like had a picnic. Well, way back then, people at
Wow.
hangings, I mean, they had picnics. There was the entertainment, and I mean, we're talking about in the 1800s and stuff, you know.
Right, right.
So when it's like going in a lighthouse. It has a circular stairway going up, and you're going through all the jail cells. And the one for women, they had to put them in a cage within the room.
Hmm.
It's a Gothic building,
Hmm.
and move it away from the window because the women would just go and stick everything out the window and go, "Come on, boys, bring us the
Uh,
candy and we'll show you this." But anyway, you
well, it's
go
the
up the stairs.
1800s. Think of what they had to do for entertainment back in those days.
Yeah, really. And so then they put all the women in one little cage so they wouldn't go to the windows for candy and stuff. But yeah, that
Unbelievable.
place was creepy. So they took us to the next door was the doll museum, and when that was creepier to me, even though I felt like a hand on the back of my head in that jail. That
Hmm.
was weird. Go to the
Oh.
doll museum. I'm like, dude, that's worse. Like, take me out. That's it. I'm done. I'm out. That's like Chucky is coming out. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, so that's cool. But Beck Street, okay. So tell us that your influences have to be a little bit of Beck in there, right? Or
Well, now Beck Street has kind of an interesting story behind that as well. The title was actually, and to answer your question, yes, I love Jeff
I
Beck.
mean,
I
we
mean,
have to
I
all
have
like him.
we
Yeah.
can talk about guitar influences, you know, all day.
Yeah.
And it there's another thing about Jeff Beck, but we'll get into that in a minute. So that the title was originally Two Pass Beck, and it, you know, a lot of times I like just to come up with some interesting titles that sometimes they would mean something to me and people might not necessarily get it, and that's okay, because I kind of gravitate towards, you know, some odd type things,
Like Mexican puppets. Yeah.
but Two Pass Back was actually directions to a great friend of mine who I've been friends with for many years, and you know, he's a great guy, musician. Turned me on to like a lot of interesting things like Alan Watts and Eastern religious philosophy and uh,
Cool.
esoteric type concepts. You know, so it was actually directions to his house, which was he was on. He would make a left two streets past Beck Street.
Okay.
So Two Pass Back. But then, and what's interesting about it is it was there was a different version of the tune put out as a single a few years ago, and it was brought to my attention that well, it kind of sounds like you're saying you're two pass back, like you're you know like better than Jeff Beck or something to that effect. I'm thinking, I don't like the sound of that. You know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't want to, you know,
Yeah.
I
Start
don't
a
care if
war.
people don't quite get my titles, but I don't want it to be misconstrued as something like that.
Yeah.
So I thought I'm going to change it to Beck Street. And
I like the name. Like just
so
sounds
it's
Backstreet sounds good.
yeah, so it's
Yeah.
kind of cool. And I updated had the artwork excuse me, the artwork updated to where the street sign said Beck Street. Anyway, uh, so that's that, and then even the title of the album, I would love to call it Truth, but Jeff Beck already has that album. Some people may have
So you can't.
noticed
Yeah,
that. But yeah, Experimental Truth, I think is a great title, and
I like it.
the idea was taken from actually from Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography, My Experiments with Truth. So I thought, experimental truth. There's
Oh, it
has
was his
ring to it,
birthday
yeah.
yesterday. That,
Sorry?
it was his birthday yesterday.
Oh yeah, yeah. So
His birth anniversary, I should say. Yeah, no, he's cool. When you think about how music is, and then you think about like Eastern philosophy and you bring it in, but there's something about, I don't, do you listen to Eastern music, like, Indian music,
I do.
Sufi music? There is a rhythm that is very interesting, and that's one thing I've noticed about your album is it's not world music, but you mess around with time in a very interesting way. You have some stops, you're like, oh, is that the end? No, it's not. Take a breath. So I feel like you bring in a lot of breath pieces, even when you're like hardcore jamming, and then it's like, oh yeah, boom, remember to breathe. So do you think any of that Eastern music gets in there, but not necessarily with the percussion? You know what I mean? It's not, we're not going to Bollywood.
Right, right, right. No, yeah, no. There's certainly hints of that, and the track Intermeshing Spectra, which that title actually was uh, was a term used by Alan Watts, and it was specifically broken up intermeshing spectra because that's the way
Mhm.
it was spelled on. I wanted to get the spelling right because I wanted to emphasize that it was y- you know basically coming from him. So, um, but yeah, so I was thinking along those lines for that track, and it's kind of got kind of a big epic riff in the middle and the ending, which kind of for me is actually was influenced from just early Led Zeppelin physical graffiti. Like that riff
Yeah.
could be like a lost riff from that those sessions or something, But you know, uh, Jimmy
Who
Page, Led Zeppelin. That's my original
Well, I
inspiration
think
for
that's what
getting
you've
into
got, that
playing
grit in there
guitar.
for sure. You've got that like, yeah, let's
Yeah.
go. Yeah.
So,
No, I was telling a friend of mine last night, I'm like, oh, this is gonna be bad driving to this, because that's ticket music. That's what I call it. Like it's ticket music. I
well,
love
if you
it.
get a
And
ticket, I know I've done my job, right?
yeah, I know. Please, I don't want one. I'm tired of that, because they always go,
Right.
where do you live? I'm like, I don't. I don't
Yeah.
live in a certain place. But going to back to the album, who's
Hmm.
playing with you? Who are the musicians? Because I
Sure.
mean, it's tight.
Well, thank you. So, sure. So the drummer who plays on the majority of the tracks is Fernando Jaramillo. He's a Chilean drummer, lives in California, and just a phenomenal player.
Totally.
Just,
I
I
mean,
can't
to
say
do that,
enough great things
the
about him. He's a wonderful player. And I love he's a sonar kit, and I've recorded with a lot of different drummers, but there's just something about the tone of his drums that I can't seem to replicate with anybody else. It was just, yeah, he phenomenal sound, amazing player, and we worked out a lot of the arrangements. And yeah, great guy, and I'm hoping to, he's very busy. He's in a lot of different projects, but I'm hoping to get a couple of live dates together with him in
Cool.
LA, before the end of the year. And then Dave Chili Moreno, the drummer of Puddle of Mud, incredible drummer.
Hmm.
He plays on Azul, but Dave is really, instrumental in the development of this record because he and I, we were either working out of my studio or his studio, which is Doom Room Studios, up in the valley here in Granada Hills. Um, we went back and forth a lot on the mixes and some of the arrangements. He had ideas for, and he did a lot of editing. And in fact, every one of the songs, I bounced back and forth, with Dave, from mixing to mastering. So he was really instrumental
Mm.
in the sound of the overall, final result of this sound of the record. So
That's
yeah,
cool.
huge shout out to Dave, and he's just again, I mean, incredible musician, incredible drummer, and not too shabby in the studio as well.
That's cool. Well, it's
Yeah.
good to have the right
Eh,
people to work with you, you know?
Yeah, so I played all the guitars, the bass, and the
Right
arrangement
on.
in terms of the strings and orchestration that you hear. So yeah,
Right
a lot of
on. I want to see
experimental
this
work, a
live.
lot of just like, back and forth. And in fact, the last track on the album, Jaguar, there was a
You,
different version that I released as a single years ago. And so this is a like yeah, yeah, it was one of those tunes where I kind of, you know, always kind of wanted to go back to. There was just something I felt like from the previous version that was missing, and I really love the the final the final version of that arrangement. So yeah.
it's really, I think, interesting doing an instrumental where there's rock and there's a little bit of different, other vibes and sounds in there that's calmer.
Hmm.
But when it's instrumental, that even to communicate with the other musicians about it, like this is what I'm doing, obviously as a guitarist, it's easier because here's a song, now let's do the rest of it, right?
Hmm.
But to be able to just portray that sound and a feeling, and that's will flow through an album, going back to that again, because it's instrumental. It's not like someone singing and saying, now this is the story you need to hear. You know what I mean? It's
Exactly.
it's a whole other deal doing instrumental, and I think it's harder in a way. But when you and there's instrumental albums out there that are now just playing in elevators, and we don't. I think they should do. Elevator music needs to change. We go
Yeah,
faster in them.
that's
Well, if
that's
you
damn
if you
sure.
had
Yeah.
your music in an elevator, we'd all be like we'd be up there already.
Right. Well,
We'd be there
I
now.
think it's always, any musician's fear that if they're writing instrumental music, that they don't want it to be background music or
Right.
something,
I mean, because
that's
it's
just
got to,
is
yeah.
it taking up your full attention, I certainly, my goal was to write music that isn't just for guitar players. I mean, of course it is, but I wanted someone who just,
Digs it.
just loves music to appreciate it, and
Yeah,
hopefully I accomplished that. But
I think so.
that
I
was
mean,
my goal, as I set out with this project. So yeah.
that's awesome. Tell us a little bit about the beginning for you as a guitarist. I was like, oh, Dallas Perkins. He's got to be related to Carl Perkins. No.
Yeah, that's actually an old kind of joke, but yeah, Carl Perkins has certainly
I
come
had
up.
to go there.
Yeah, I I I asked Paul Gilbert many years ago to there's another project I was doing if he would give me a quote for my album, and he's like, "Yeah, here's my quote. It's the best Perkins I've heard since Carl." So,
There it is. See, there you go. I like
so
it.
anyway, but sorry. So your question was
Yeah, starting, where
beginning.
did you start? Like, after Carl Perkins,
Mhm,
Dallas arrived in the world.
there you go.
There it is.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, well, okay. I've always wanted to play guitar as far back as I can remember. I mean, when I was a kid, I would always ask for a guitar for Christmas, and inevitably I would get like a plastic kind of Mickey Mouse guitar with plastic strings. I'm like, no, that's not what I wanted.
I want the
And I
thing. I
got
want the real
so
one.
yeah. So I think when I was 8 or 9, I had an acoustic, and I would play around with it. I didn't really get serious until I was about 14, and a friend of mine really did an incredible service explaining to me, who Led Zeppelin were, who Jimmy Page was, and a lot of the other
Oh no,
bands.
yeah, yeah.
And and kind of like a light bulb went off, and simultaneously my sister was picking up records from Alice Cooper,
Sweet.
Aerosmith, ZZ Top. So it was just like that was it. I mean, I just went head first into it, and so
It's
my
crazy.
early influences, are Jimmy Page, Richie Blackmore. I was
Yeah.
immediately got into, like, Yes, Steve Howe, and there's so many players. Interestingly, I once when I was a kid, once I had my mind set on something, it was hard for me to like kind of branch out and which was, unfortunate, but it's true. I love Jimmy Page, and it was interesting because I think I heard Jeff Beck. There was an interview or radio spot where he was talking like negatively about Jimmy Page, but it was probably taken out of context.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm never going to listen to Jeff
It's
Beck.
a little ribbing. Yeah, yeah.
So, but aside from something like that, I, I got into like Jimi Hendrix and Jeff Beck and guys like that kind of later on. And
Mm.
from Jimmy Page, like within that first year, all of a sudden Van Halen came out, and then of course I was just wow, this is the most phenomenal guitar playing I've ever heard, and so Edward Van Halen just was exactly
Isn't
what
it like when you're a
super.
kid listening to
Mhm.
stuff, it feels like when you're a kid and you're discovering all this music. It's
Mhm.
like the candy store. Some kids wanted the candy store, but
Right.
then the rest of us that got into the music zone, it was like just leave us alone. And you're either the cool kids in school or you hung out with all the ones who just like, let's just go listen to records, man. And
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like you would hang out in the music room at school and not even go in the schoolyard. You just wanted to go in there and talk about, hey, did you hear this? Did you hear that?
Right.
And it's what I miss about vinyl so much is just
Oh
those
man, I
crazy
miss those
times.
days.
And
I miss
and you
going to a
just
record store and just going, knowing an album's coming out, going to the store and actually seeing there it is, and yeah,
it's
that was a
coming
wonderful
back. I
life.
mean, it is coming back, which is thank God for Jack White. I think Jack White's doing a lot to try and get some of these companies to go back to doing the bigger ones, but I don't think they want to invest in it like his kind of like Third Man Records and whatever. I don't,
Hmm.
it's hard to get people to go backwards, once they've pushed the button and moved forwards, but it's
I
out
think
there.
so, but it's pretty encouraging because vinyl has made a huge comeback, and I think people are just dying to have a physical, tangible product. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
aside from the digital downloads, I think it's kind of like, yeah, I mean it's there it is if you need it, but that's again that's super encouraging
I
to
mean, the just the album was because you had the artwork and you would sit and you had, I think there was something about the action of being careful about putting the needle on the album. There was an
Mhm.
intention and you had don't scratch it. And like lending
Right,
an album out was worse than lending a book out.
trying to
Like
keep your
do
album in
not,
immaculate
yeah, if
condition.
you
Yeah,
you didn't lend it out to certain friends, you just didn't lend it out. It's like,
right,
no, you can come listen at our house, but you cannot take it home with you because I do not trust you. See,
right.
I don't want your beer can on
Well, the
Jimi
CD
Hendrix's
version of
face.
my album comes out on October 12th, so
Oh, super,
yeah, so it'll be
super.
available on my site dallasperkins.com, and
Ah, good.
yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. In fact, I mean, I've gotten a lot of people just asking, requesting. I really want it on CD. So again, that's what I'm saying. It's like I love to hear that. I love to hear the fact that people really
Dude,
want
I
the whole
travel
thing with the
around with
artwork.
I have CDs in the car. I mean, we're on the road 100% and I have things like CDs, actual CDs that
Yeah,
have been traveling with us and I can't like keep adding to them anymore, but because it's like Buddhism. If you put something in the car, something else has to come out. So I have to do the download thing, which, it's great,
yeah,
but like I don't want to ever get rid of my car because it has a CD player. It's
right.
like, you know what
There
I
you
mean?
go.
There's something
I
about
still have a
putting
yeah,
that in,
yeah. I have a CD player in my car as well. So
Yeah, yeah, and
absolutely.
just putting it up. But then they do have scratches and bumps, and then you tend to get familiar with the scratches and the bumps. It's kind of weird how you are
Yeah.
like, as musicians. But I love that, just having that childhood, attraction into music of just listening to the greats and then picking up guitars and going for it. When was
Mhm.
it that you said, okay, I'm actually really doing this? Like going from being a kid, a teenager to holy shit, I'm going to LA, I'm going here, whatever, I'm going for it. Because that's not easy.
Yeah, well, of course that all comes in stages. I mean, once I had made up my mind that this is what I wanted to do with my life, I mean, it was just a matter of putting a band together, put a band together when I was 15 and we started gigging
Yeah.
right away. In fact, I had in the I'm totally dating myself, but it was in those days you didn't have a picture on your license. right? It was just the license, no picture with
Oh
the
my God,
license
you could get
number.
away with anything then.
Yeah, so what I did was to be able to play in clubs was I took the numbers with an X-Acto knife so my birthday would show that I was 21 even though I was like
Oh my
17.
God, you are so taking me back to what we did in high school. Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
yeah,
that's what I did because I you couldn't get in the club if, you know, even if you were in the band if you were underage.
before Photoshop.
Yeah, it was all about, you know, getting out there and start gigging and writing songs and the whole thing. I
Mm,
was originally going to go to, you know, move to New York, you know,
mm,
as because I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and which was is great and still in a way it's still kind of like my hometown, even though I've lived in Los
cool.
Angeles since the 90s. Um, but yeah, I mean, New York was like kind of where you would hear things happening, you know, from the 70s, you know. But it's like there was a time, it was probably around right around, you know, 80 early 80s, like 82, 83, where you just started hearing all this, you know, this new wave of hard rock metal coming out of Los Angeles, you know, and
Really?
that
Huh?
was a place to be for guitar players. So yeah, again, it's like I made up my mind to get it together, and I think I knew one person out here, and we hit the road. Some friends of mine, and had a
That's
caravan heading out to Los Angeles. We were early Hollywood settlers
That's
from Pittsburgh.
awesome though. Like, yeah, no, because I mean, because you think of everyone, yeah, early, you know, because everybody's like head and it's like always, you know, the Tinseltown kind of thing. But here's
Yeah.
the music wave, you know. It's interesting to me about going from Pennsylvania because so many musicians we've interviewed, like that are hard rockers and is really badass what they do, come from
Mhm.
Pennsylvania. Like, I don't, have you heard Bang, the band? Bang? They're one of the first heavy metal bands,
Yeah.
if not
Familiar
the
with.
first, come out of there too. And it's
Mhm.
like they just said, you know, and there was something about New York and Boston. Like people from Florida would go up to Boston, everybody else would go down to Florida. It's kind of this crazy time that happened in late 70s, early 80s. I was in England playing punk time at that point in South Africa, but so it was a different kind of
Mhm.
you'd get anything that was coming from the English side in you know when you were in high school in South Africa. But
Mhm.
with you be when you go back to being in a band like 15 years old, that's something we've got to think about, I think, is supporting young bands because
Yeah.
they become something. You know, we think, oh, you know, Johnny's got something in the basement, you know, but there's
Sure.
something more that can come from that, right?
And there's so many unbelievable like young players. It's scary. You see
Uh,
how incredible some of these guys are that I'm seeing on YouTube, and you know, and it's such a like kind of a fascinating time for musicians now because you know in the old days you know there was like really it was very singular. You know, you'd made it. The record companies would sign you. There's radio spots. There was maybe you'd get into a magazine or it'd be word of mouth to you
mm.
know as a means of building your career. But now it's
Flyers on
kind of
cars.
yeah,
I've been there, done that.
it's like if you were interested in any genre of music, you know, um, you would know about whoever is like famous, so to speak, back then. But now it's kind of like it's fascinating because there's like with social media and everything, it's kind of like this multiverse you can tap into, and like I'll find somebody like on Patreon or YouTube, and they've got millions of followers, and I'm thinking this, wow, this I've never even heard of this guy, this person,
Yeah.
some influencer. I mean, you know what I mean, and so it's really kind of amazing, you know, just
I think, yeah, people were going for a long time, oh, the music today is shit or this and that. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I mean,
mhm,
if you listen to regular mainstream radio driving across the country, we do that and it's like, okay, enough of that because it's the same playlist.
yeah,
And I think that's wrong because, you know, the Eagles did more than Hotel California. I'm just saying. I
sure,
every single day you hear it, and you know you cross the county line. Always, this is my biggest just rant about like what's going on in regular radio is they're playing the same set list. You go over the county line and they start replaying it on a different affiliated, you know, station.
right,
So I just want all these radio stations because people still do old school radio
Yeah.
terrestrial radio to play like your music and everyone's music more, than it, you know what I mean? Because why not? But it's this, I don't know what's going on, but
Hmm.
unfortunately it's not there. But when you dig in online, the world is your oyster in music. We have more music of today. And I wonder about like all the influences. We are able to access all these influences that we didn't get to access so readily before. If you had a Jimi Hendrix album, that's what you got. And then if someone actually wrote a biography, you're like, dude, I got to get that.
Right.
It's like you only
Sure.
had what you had, that you
Hmm.
didn't have like all these, you know, things on YouTube and all of that that you could just keep going for hours. And everybody that's, I'm going to make a video using, Jimi Hendrix or whatever.
Right, right. You had limited access to an artist that, that you were a fan of.
Now it's
Sure. It's like if you could find anything. I remember the first time I heard like Ed Van Halen uh do an interview, and it was on like on the news because of it was a
wow.
report on what was it? It was like National Enquirer or something. Like the paparazzi got a hold of him and Valerie Bertinelli, and I'm like, wow, Eddie Van
Whoa.
Halen is talking. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I've never
He's a
seen
human
that.
being. Yeah.
Now it's kind of like,
Whatever
you
now.
know, you're just you get on YouTube and you're just like inundated with, so much. It's like I don't have, you know what I mean? Where
Well,
it's true.
if
It's
you're
like completely the opposite early on. I mean,
if you're gonna take your
what you had.
album,
I'm sorry?
if you're gonna take your album Experimental Truth, right?
Hmm.
And go and perform it like now, just any place you could, just like your favorite place to perform,
Hmm.
and take people. Okay, we could do the famous people like Eddie Van Halen and all of that, but
Hmm.
let's look at people that you've seen that you don't like, you on the YouTube thing that you would want to perform with you.
Oh,
It's like a guest, a special guest.
who I would like to perform with me?
Yeah, just from like rabbit hole music on YouTube.
Well, there's people that I would like to work with in town.
Yeah.
I've been, Tony Franklin, bass player. I would like to get in on a few projects. He was a bass player for the Firm and Blue Murder. I don't know if you're familiar with he pretty renowned fretless bass player. Um,
I don't know how they do that, man. I'm like, I need my
yeah,
core, like I need my little Richies.
yeah, but that's something I have to think about.
Yeah. Just like, like if you were just doing it and having like a, because I know you do the ultimate jam, right? And so you could have like you
Yes,
just come
yeah.
in and perform and,
Mhm.
do some of the songs off your new album and have a little jam. Where would you want to like go for your ultimate like show? Even if you've
Where,
never played there.
wow. Well, I'd love to go to Germany. Yeah,
Mm.
just because and Italy, because Italy is is huge for guitar playing. Fans of guitar music in general. Um, the I definitely have my sights on Europe. To get out there to play because it's really again an ideal place for someone like myself.
There's an
And I
appreciation.
at this stage, right,
Mm.
I'm trying to set up a tour next summer that's primarily going to be California, uh, you know, uh, as far as the West Coast, you know, Vegas, Phoenix,
Sweet.
and but then majority would be on the East Coast, like so, like New England states, New York, Pennsylvania, of course, Florida, of course, uh, the Carolinas, kind of do
You,
that run,
you gotta,
Atlanta.
you can't leave out
Uh,
our town, our hometown where our storage unit is in Tucson. Tucson's like super cool. It's like the super cool city of the state of
yeah,
Arizona. They
yeah,
do. They have good venues, awesome
cool.
musicians. Yeah, yeah. No, no, I'm just
Sure.
just saying.
I would
I
love to
know
hit
Phoenix
hit
always
that
gets
hit
that
your
thing,
town.
but
Yeah,
I gotta stand up for
yeah,
Tucson. And it's the gastronomy capital of the world, UNESCO gastronomy capital. So you'll be fed well.
yeah. Okay. Well, I like that.
you know. But yeah, so a big summer tour next year. That'd be
So yeah,
awesome.
it's primarily like an East Coast, West Coast with probably Nashville, a few dates in Texas, that kind of thing.
Mm,
But that's what I got my sights on right now.
yeah.
So
That's awesome. That's
Yeah,
exciting. Well, hopefully we'll see you on the road, but Europe too. I
absolutely.
mean, there's something about Europe. I just think they have this extreme appreciation of the arts. They
Hmm.
really do. And I don't know if it's just because, they're ancient. I don't mean it, you know what I mean? They're not old, but like
Right.
ancient has been part of
Ancient
their
history.
culture.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
you have a good time, man. This is
Oh, yeah.
awesome.
Thank you.
So you got videos coming out?
I do indeed. In fact,
Okay, so
there'll be some more some pretty cool promo videos that I'll be launching on my YouTube channel in about a week, uh, and then there'll be
awesome.
one a week, my channel's easy to get to. It's YouTube, of course, .com. It's funny, on Facebook, if you put a YouTube link, it's for some reason they just block it or they
No, no, they
put
don't like
minimal
each other.
feed, so I'm always thinking of, how to get around that. But anyway, youtube.com/dalchemy, which is alchemy with a D, will take you to my channel. So
All right,
yeah,
so
check
on
that out.
YouTube,
Hmm.
follow that, and then also go to dallasperkins.com. That's also important. Go get
Yes,
the album. That's even more important.
yes.
And we're gonna close. Can we close with? You got to say it for me because for some reason it's just not going well with my mind here. In via domum. See, we're
In
talking
via
about
domum, yes,
domum,
which is
domum.
Latin for the way home.
Oh well,
Quasi
that's
classical
perfect.
piece for you.
That's a nice way to close it because I want people
Yeah.
to hear all the different styles. I mean, because you play anything you want in the world. Like seriously, do you read
Thanks so much.
music? Do
I'm
you
sorry?
read music? Do you read music?
Yes. I don't do it regularly, so I'm not all that great at it, but understanding theory and yeah, yeah, of course, but yeah,
Oh, that's cool. I
absolutely.
once auditioned for a madrigal singing group. I don't know why, but I
Hmm.
was just testing myself, and they made me sing by notes, like because I'm used to like la la la, hit you off
Sure.
and go. And I passed. And this one little lady sitting here with their auto harp, and then they're like, "No, we want you in the group." I'm like, "I ain't doing this. Are you kidding me? No way, I'm not doing it." But I
Right,
made it. But to actually sing I mean, to read music and sing in that style was like a whole wow.
right.
That's hard. That's hard work to do. But yeah, because a lot of people
But it's
don't
the
read
joy in
music.
doing it. That's what it's
Yeah,
important.
it's another language,
It
you know?
is.
It is. So yeah, good stuff. Everyone,
It is.
dallasperkins.com. We're going to close with the song in Via de Mum. And I want to thank our good friends over at the Lion and the Rose Bed and Breakfast in Asheville, North Carolina. If you're going to see a show like it at the Orange Peel, you're going to go on a trolley tour, go see the Smoky Mountains, the Blue Ridge Parkway. You got to go see our friends. So go to lion-rose.com. They're rocker like they're the rockers of bed and breakfasting because every time I talk to them, bro, we just came back from the show, man. Anyway, so they said we want to sponsor anything to do with rock music, and they like your music. They were listening to you last night, so they're
Awesome.
like, "This is cool." Anyway,
Cool.
thanks so much, everyone. Keep up with us at
Thank you.
bigblendradio.com. Thanks.